Michigan Out of Doors Online is brought to you in part by...
For over 30 years, Vanguard Outdoors has made the gear that turns a regular hunt into another fine day of field. We know that a good shooting stick or a nice pair of binoculars can make or break your day. Our design teams include serious hunters who work hard to bring you the best sporting optics, shooting sticks, tripods, bags, and more. We are Vanguard Outdoors.
Well, hello everybody from the top of the Mackinac Bridge. Welcome to Michigan Out of Doors. We're so glad you joined us this week. I'm Jenny Silik, and I'm going to take you for a tour of this magnificent bridge, which is the gateway between the Upper Peninsula and the Lower Peninsula. Jimmy and Jordan also have some stories on this week's show, but I can't imagine they're going to be nearly as exciting as mine.
Well, that is right, Jenny. I'm not sure if our next story is going to be as exciting as being on the top of the Mackinac Bridge, but one thing that does generate a lot of excitement here in Michigan is deer hunting and talking about deer management. We're going to sit down with the head of the Natural Resources Commission, Tom Baird, in this week's show and have a conversation about all things deer hunting here in the great state of Michigan. Make sure you stay tuned. I'm Jimmy Gretzinger, and it's time for Michigan Out of Doors.
From the first spring rains to the soft summer breeze, dancing on the pine forest floor, the autumn colors catch your eyes. Here come the crystal winter skies. It's Michigan, Michigan out of doors.
What a beautiful day in the woods.
Someday our children all will see this is their finest legacy, the wonder and the love of Michigan. As the wind comes whispering through the trees, the sweet smell of nature's in the air. From the Great Lakes to the quiet stream, shining like a sportsman's dream, it's a love of Michigan we all share.
Michigan Out of Doors is presented by Country Smokehouse, a sportsman's meat processor and Michigan destination since 1988. Offers a variety of homemade smoked meats and Michigan-made products in-store and online. The Country Smokehouse features an outdoor barbecue and bar. Details at countrysmokehouse.com. By Greenmark Equipment. Greenmark Equipment is a John Deere dealership network in southwest Michigan and northern Indiana. Greenmark provides sales and services to farmers, commercial businesses, large property owners, and homeowners. Information about pricing and products available can be found online at greenmarkequipment.com.
By Network Outdoors, connecting members to share experiences, help grow businesses, and to give back to the outdoor community. Learn more at one of 10 monthly meetups or online at networkoutdoors.com.
For nearly 67 years, the mighty Mackinac Bridge has been a gateway connecting Michiganders to the Upper and Lower Peninsulas. Prior to opening on November 1, 1957, travelers waited to board a car ferry to take them across the 5-mile stretch of the Straits of Mackinac. Last week, my husband and I were invited on a tour to the top of the south tower of the bridge, something only a handful of lucky folks experience each year. 25 nonprofit organizations are chosen from a list of entries each year and are awarded tower tour certificates to be raffled or auctioned off for charitable purposes. A list of the organizations that were selected for the tour certificates is posted on the Bridge Authority's website. As a member of the media, I was able to take the tour to share with our viewers. So after a drive out to the South Tower and then a quick elevator ride up, I was looking down on the Straits of Mackinac. I am on top of the Mackinac Bridge right now, and if you didn't know it before, you'll know it after you see the footage. This is why they call it the Mighty Mac, when you get to be up here on top. Holy moly!
Welcome to the gateway to Michigan's deer camps. We're on top of the Mighty Mackinac Bridge that back in the early 50s, many said couldn't be built. It took a good team of people put together. The leader in that team was Governor Soapy Williams. He created the Mackinac Bridge Authority in 1950, and the authority took it upon themselves, led by Senator Prentice Brown. Prentice Brown was the only senator to come from the UP, the United States senator, I should add, and they together created a authority that was appointed by Governor Soapy Williams, and from there they hired probably the world's best engineer, a gentleman by the name of Dr. Steinman, that was a complete genius when it comes to engineering. He designed the Mackinac Bridge, worked with the Bridge Authority, and the design of this bridge back then was very unique because there were so many skeptics here in the state of Michigan that said this bridge could never be built. The design of this bridge with the open truss spans, along with the center lane, the open grading, allowed the wind to come through and exit right up the bridge without putting the structural stress on it that the other bridges in the United States was having problems with. With that being said, there was a team of ironworkers that were formed, and the last thing you want to tell an ironworker is they can't build something. Not only will they build it, but they'll build it on time and under budget. And that's exactly what happened here. That construction team as a whole, the ironworkers erected 300,000 tons of structural steel within 3 years. If you look at behind me here, the main cable, inside that cable, there's 12,580 strands of individual cables, wire, that make up that cable. They hand drove 5 million rivets on this bridge in 3 years. And it's unbelievable how they met that challenge. They, along with the operating engineers, the carpenters, the laborers, the cement masons, the painters, put all this bridge together in record timing. It's really something. If you take and you look to the south here, and I want you just to envision what this was like before this bridge was being built. There was blocks and blocks that were laid out for the deer hunters because the lines would get so long. They had to wait anywhere from 10 to 12 hours, sometimes a night or two, before they could cross the Straits of Mackinac to get into Michigan's sportsman's paradise here. And it was just phenomenal. And you know, these college kids nowadays think that they really come up with something about tailgating. If it wasn't for the deer hunters here at the Straits of Mackinac waiting to catch that ferry, we might not even have tailgating now. It was those deer hunters that created that. And what was really remarkable about those deer hunters, when they'd wait in line, the camaraderie that they had with one another. They'd actually look forward to next year, hopefully seeing the same people they talked to before as they were waiting to cross the Mighty Mac.
Michigan's outdoors men and women have always loved traveling from the lower to upper peninsulas. In 1957, the founder of Michigan Outdoors TV, Mort Neff, was on hand to interview Governor Williams at the grand opening of the bridge. It was a statewide celebration for sure.
Well, there's right now we're standing 552 feet above the Straits of Mackinac, and when you get down to the water table, you have another 200 feet of tower based or buried in caissons to get down to the bedrock. Okay. Every year, this is probably the busiest bridge without a doubt here in the state of Michigan. There's in excess of, I think it's 3 million vehicles a year that cross this bridge. Just a year ago, we had over 200 million crossings here on the Mighty Mac since November 1st, 1957. Oh, wow, nice. And it's really remarkable how well this bridge serves the state of Michigan and the nation for transporting goods. Well, it's also the gateway for all 4 seasons, the beautiful seasons that we have, the changing seasons that we have here in the state of Michigan, from the snowmobilers to the trout fishermen to all the families that want to come up here and walk the beaches and see wonderful waterfalls and Lake Superior. But equally, the Yoopers like to come down and see the trolls in the lower Michigan as well. So it really does work way. It serves as a gateway for both peninsulas, and it's a wonderful thing, the old Mighty Mac.
The Mackinac Bridge is one of Michigan's crowning jewels, and it was definitely one of the highlights of my career to tour the tower and to share it with my husband, Matt. We couldn't be more grateful to do so. So this is unbelievable. What a rare, super rare opportunity to be able to come up here and just take all of this in from up here and see the top of the bridge that we've driven over like thousands of times.
Once in a lifetime.
Yeah.
This is amazing.
Unbelievable. So we're very grateful and thankful that we were were able to do this. I thought my knees would be a little weaker when I got to the top, but it's really not that bad. And my mom will be very happy to know that we made our way back down, hopefully, when we're done.
Okay, well, we are here in beautiful Elk Rapids with Tom Baird, the commissioner, the head commissioner. What is the chair of the committee?
Chair.
Okay. And Tom, before we get into talking a little bit about deer hunting and some of the new regulations for this year, for those folks that are watching that maybe aren't familiar with what the NRC even is, kind of what are you guys, how do you interact with the DNR, and how did you get involved in this whole thing?
Well, the Natural Resources Commission is the body which establishes most hunting and fishing regulations. Fishing, we're pretty much on our own. With hunting regulations, we share authority with the department.
Okay.
So the both of us are very active in the review and setting of deer hunting regulations. There's a view of some that our authority is much broader, but it's not. That's pretty much what it's limited to formally. Informally, we're also a sounding board for other management decisions in fish and wildlife and in other areas of the DNR's work.
Okay. And has that been what you thought it would be, being a commissioner? Is it a lot easier, a lot tougher? A few people complaining here and there?
It's about what I thought it would
Okay.
be, because I had known a lot of commissioners, so I had heard their stories. It's a lot of fun, really. I enjoy it. I've learned a lot, met a lot of people, really got outside my comfort zone in terms of beyond trout and beyond fishing. You know, I hunt, particularly deer and upland game, but I'm just a lunch bucket hunter, and it was an eye-opener to see the depth into which some of these regulations go and the science behind them.
Okay. Now, I know we had some new regulations for this upcoming year. We kind of touched on some of those last week on the show. But one of the things that was new this year was these DMIs, Deer Management Initiative. And I know that was, from my understanding, was kind of driven by the NRC, that you guys asked the DNR to put that together. Can you tell me a little bit about that? What was kind of the thinking? Why did you guys want to do that?
Sure. Back in 2023, we went through the regular deer reg cycle, passed some regulations, and at the end of it, everyone was a little frustrated that we weren't really getting at the key problems that we're facing right now. And in the Upper Peninsula, as you know, right now, folks feel that the deer herd is way down and hunting with it. The biologists tell us that big problems include weather and habitat. And in the Lower Peninsula, we have a huge deer population problem, density problem, if you want to put it that way. And the further south you go, the bigger the problem is, to the extent that you have deer eating themselves out of house and home in both places for totally different reasons. So we knew we had a lot of big problems, and that nibbling around the edges with a few regulations every year wasn't going to do it. So I spoke with Chad Stewart, our deer biologist and specialist, and he was feeling the same frustrations. And we said we need something bigger, a bigger process, which would include public input, scientific background, and just a bigger, broader look at the problems so that we can figure out what to do about them. Some of them will involve the NRC and regulations. Some of them will be more management oriented and more in the bailiwick of the Department of Natural Resources.
Okay.
But we'll be hopefully hand in hand on all of them.
Now, was that once so the DMIs, one for the Upper Peninsula, one for the Lower Peninsula, they put forth their thoughts or ideas,
Right.
whatever, and then were many of them adopted?
Yes, what you're referring to as the DMIs are actually the advisory groups within the Deer Management Initiative, which is bigger than those groups.
Okay.
The initiative is a multi-year initiative. It involves everything from hunting regulations to sportsmen against hunger, to disease issues, to habitat issues in the Upper Peninsula. So it involves a lot more than just these groups, which were advisory in those areas,
Okay.
but really focused on getting some advice to us right away for the 2024 hunting season. The advice we received was really well thought out. Both groups worked very hard. Chad Stewart provided oodles of deep scientific information, and in the end we got numerous recommendations from the advisory groups. Some of them were simply rejected as not possible or illegal. Some of them were accepted for immediate action, and a lot of them went into what we called the roadmap, which were good ideas that we want to follow up on, but either the NRC couldn't do it for the fall of 2024 because it was outside of our authority, or we needed legislation or whatever, or they weren't for us to do, they were for the department to do. So they went into this roadmap for future consideration and action.
Okay, and so the groups that were put together, are they done now? Did they fulfill their role?
Well, they fulfilled their current role.
Okay.
But I've been urging, and I think the department agrees, that we need a continued public input process into deer regulation and management. We haven't had that the way we've had it with bear, with fur bears, with cold water species, with various lakes and geographic areas. But we haven't had it for deer, which is the biggest single hunting sport in Michigan. So we think that ought to continue, probably not in its present form. This was a very heavy lift for everyone, particularly the staff, so it needs to be streamlined. But we need to keep some sort of formalized public input process going.
And how do you strike that balance between, I know some people say, oh, we should listen more to the public and what the hunters want. Then there's, a sizable group of people that would say, we don't want to listen to the public at all. We want to go off sound scientific research and the biologists and trust what they have to say. How do you balance those two things?
Well, sometimes it's pretty easy and sometimes it's not so easy, but you do need to balance them. We start with our statute, which says that we're going to regulate using sound scientific information from department biologists and others, other scientists, other university folks, other science sources. So we do all of that. But sometimes science doesn't answer the question. It gives you the information you need to figure out what the result of various regulatory options is, but it doesn't tell you what regulation to choose. And that's where the other aspects of the job come in, and that's why we have public input. We ask ourselves, what's best for the anglers and the hunters out there? How can we maximize, within reason, opportunity? And sometimes we have to settle conflicts. In deer hunting right now, there's a question about predation in the Upper Peninsula, involving not only wolves but also bears and coyotes and bobcats, and whether we should somehow up the harvest on those species in order to protect deer, which seem to be down right now. Well, everybody has an opinion on that question, let me tell you, and it's strongly held and they don't match up quite often, so we have to figure those things out also. It's not all pure science.
Okay.
Sometimes it's just, as you say, it's a balancing.
Now, one of the decision that kind of has gotten a lot of attention, I think, and it doesn't take effect this year, but starting next year there would be antlerless only for the youth and the Liberty hunt. What was the reasoning behind that?
That was one of our toughest proposals, and going back to an earlier question, in addition to the advice we got from the DMI groups, we also received advice from the federal government, state government, several scientists, and there were consultations with the tribes. The commissioners also weighed in, and one of the commissioners proposed does only for the special hunts in the fall, the early hunts. And the rationale behind that, if I can speak for them, was sort of twofold. Number one, we just need to be taking more does off the landscape in the lower peninsula for population control reasons. Now, the response to that is, yeah, but the effect is going to be de minimis in those hunts per se. And that's true, but the other rationale is that we need to start raising consciousness about the need to take more does. We need to do things by way of our regulations as well as management in order to reduce the herd. And the further south you go, the more important that becomes. And so these were two of the rationales that applied to these hunts that we could implement. We have other proposals on the table regarding deer population control in the lower peninsula, but these were the ones that we could do now for the 2024 season was the original proposal. I suggested that we wait until 2025, mostly because people had been buying licenses already and had expectations. But it turns out that may have been a lucky call anyway. We've received a lot of input on those regulations in particular, both from parents regarding their children and also from disabled and their representatives and groups. And as to the latter, we've been learning a lot about the challenges they face, and it's not as simple as you would think. For example, I didn't realize that with a lot of the disabled, cold is a factor. It's not just mobility, but it's being out in the cold. So the earlier hunt allows them to participate because of that. So we're learning things, and
so could those regulations change between now and then, or
they could?
They could. Okay.
They can always change year to year, and in this particular case, as you noted, we made them effective in the fall of 2025. So we have an entire regulatory cycle to do other things we're planning on doing, as well as revisit some things we might want to revisit.
Are you afraid that we'll have a lot less youth licenses sold during that time frame because of that regulation, or?
I don't think so, and I'm hoping that parents will sort of study this problem a little bit and understand that we need to bring people into the sport who recognize that hunting is not just recreation. It's the way we manage wildlife in Michigan. And right now, we need to manage an overpopulated deer herd in the lower peninsula. And so we need to make doe hunting just as attractive and important as buck hunting is now. We have a culture, it's a buck hunting culture in this state. That's not going to go away overnight, but we need to start thinking about what we're teaching the children, not only about hunting, but about conservation and the role hunting has with respect to that.
And just as we kind of wrap up, what is your role? I know we get a lot of feedback as well as that you do, I'm sure, from hunters and anglers around the state, and there tends to be a sense that maybe the commissioners over the years, I'm not speaking for the ones that are just active now, but that they're not really that avid a hunter or an angler, and so they have different priorities than the hunting and fishing community. I don't know if that's true or not, but with the time that you've been on there, have you noticed that at all? Is that even a thing, or have you been really pretty comfortable with the commissioners that have been named?
I'm comfortable with the commissioners. They all hunt and fish, and they all have their real focus of interest. They're also very into conservation as an avocation, and they're also very willing to spend hour after hour learning the science and talking to the stakeholders that we serve. So I don't have a problem with that. There are groups out there who think, I say groups, there are people out there, some of them have representative groups, who think that the key goal, the number one priority, the number one value of wildlife is hunting as a recreational sport. And some of us look past that, even though we all hunt and fish and love it. But you've got to recognize that hunting is a tool for conservation. And sometimes one group or another doesn't like that tool. Sometimes people think if you don't maximize hunting opportunity, even though it won't do any good, you know, that's wrong, and you don't properly value hunting.
Well, I think one thing Tom really wanted to drive home to me, and I think really all of us viewers as well, is that this DMI, the Deer Management Initiative, is not over. This was just kind of the first part in a multi-year look at kind of managing wildlife and deer specifically a little bit differently here in the state of Michigan. Hopefully that'll come to fruition with some better deer hunting around the state, but thanks to him. And next week we'll be showing you kind of our third part in this three-part series on deer management, where we sit down with a member of the Upper Peninsula DMI and see his viewpoint and kind of how that whole thing went down. Make sure you are joining us over the next few weeks, and if we don't see you in the woods or on the water, hopefully you'll see you right back here next week on your PBS station.
Michigan Out of Doors is presented by.
Do you dream of somewhere bigger than your backyard? You can get there with Greenstone. Whether you want to hunt, fish, hike, or just watch the sunset, we're ready to help you own your place in the great outdoors. To learn more, visit greenstonefcs.com.
By G5 Outdoors, makers of the Quest and Prime bows, manufactured and designed in Memphis, Michigan. G5 offers a line of archery bows, broadheads, and accessories on the web at g5outdoors.com.
Mid-Michigan Ponds has been building and maintaining ponds and lakes throughout Michigan for nearly 25 years. We combine biology and heavy equipment to make pondscapes that are sustainable and fishable. More information at midmichiganponds.com. Closed captioning brought to you by Double D Ranch Foundation, a nonprofit 501c3 foundation working to make hunting and fishing accessible for those with disabilities.
When I wander far away, a dream stays with me night and day. It's the road that leads to my home state. I am a Michigan man. Changing seasons